Joining us now is Caleb Maupin, political analyst and journalist, to talk about the Russia-Ukraine peace talks. We'll just have him back shortly to talk about the Russia-UN peace talks, where discussions are going, what was the outcome of Monday and Tuesday's discussions, and what lies ahead. And we'll have him shortly. And just to recap, US President Donald Trump offered his assurance that US troops would not be sent to help defend against Russia after seeming to leave open the possibility the day before. Welcome now to Caleb. Hello, Caleb.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm good.
So if we could get into this Trump-Russia-Ukraine peace deal and its geopolitical implications. Trump goes to Alaska, meets Putin, then Zelensky comes to the White House on Monday with European leaders, several talks take. But where are we with this peace deal? Is there a peace deal? And what are some of the key terms that this deal between Russia and Ukraine, and how might they differ from early frameworks such as Minsk II?
Well, the big question right now is security guarantees for both sides. The conflict began because Russia wanted security guarantees from Ukraine. They wanted a guarantee that Ukraine would not join the NATO alliance. They also wanted a guarantee that Ukraine would stop terrorizing the people in the Donbass regions, recognize their right to speak the Russian language, etc. In addition to that, many on the Ukrainian side, they have their concerns that, what's to say this isn't just a conflict that'll just be temporarily put on hold, and then Russia will start the conflict up again. So both sides are talking security guarantee. And that is the point of division and question at this point. Now, Russia has recently said that they are hoping that all the permanent member states of the Security Council could be involved in an agreement involving security guarantees that would make sure this conflict really ends. Russia is not interested in a temporary ceasefire, and I think Ukraine probably has a similar feeling, that they want this to actually end the war and just be a permanent end to the conflict, and that would require different countries being involved in making clear where the borders are, etc. Now, it appears that some of the European Union countries have the notion that Ukraine, maybe it won't join NATO, but it would join the European Union as part of the agreement. And Viktor Orban of Hungary has shot that down as ridiculous, and it just doesn't make sense. That seems to be a point of disagreement at this point. In addition to that, there are questions. I mean, look, the real question that we're not really getting any information on is, where is the border going to be, right? We have the new republics that voted to join with Russia are considered part of the Russian Federation right now. Ukraine, at this point, doesn't recognize them as part of the Russian Federation. So when there's a peace deal, there's going to have to be a new border drawn between Ukraine and Russia. And that, I feel, is probably the biggest question hanging over these negotiations. As of yet, we're not really hearing from world leaders about that issue, right? We're hearing disagreements about security guarantees. We're hearing talk of, should Ukraine join the European Union or not? But that issue, where the border is going to be, that seems to be the biggest point of contention, and that's what, the most questions at this point are related to. And I'm waiting to see. I mean, it sounds like there is agreement behind closed doors about what that will be, but we're not hearing what that agreement is. I'm waiting to see where the map is, how the map is going to be redrawn. That's the biggest question I have. But the fact that we're not hearing about disagreement about that, it seems like some kind of agreement has already been reached about that. It would be good if the public could be aware of what that agreement was.
Do you know how Ukraine is presenting this deal domestically? Does it see it as a compromise, a capitulation, or a path to stability?
Well, it's interesting because, the voices of Ukraine that we hear in Western media are not representative of Ukraine overall, right? Zelensky himself was elected on the platform of preventing a war like this from ever happening. And then he got into office and realized, I'm not really the leader of Ukraine. Ukraine is run by NATO. It's run by the British and American intelligence services. Ukraine lost its sovereignty in 2014 and became a puppet of the West to antagonize Russia. And that's the most important thing to remember about this. The notion that Ukraine is a democratic country fighting for its independence or something, that's absurd. Ukraine had its sovereignty taken away in 2014, and since then, the United States, I mean, you read the New York Times, the CIA was there setting up, and the Minsk negotiations that were supposed to resolve this conflict were just a plan to buy time to set the stage for this conflict. The whole plan was to provoke and set the stage for this conflict to take place. However, the Ukrainian people have been opposed to it, and now it's revealed that the body count among Ukrainians is over 1 million. Some recent hacks, have been revealing that the number of people in Ukraine in the military who are either dead or missing is well over 1 million. 1,700,000 is being listed as a possible number. I mean, it's a huge amount of people dead. They're dragging people off the street, disabled people, people over the age of 60, because they are desperate to keep the manpower in the military. So many people from around the world in Ukraine have lost their property. Ukrainians who fled overseas because they don't want to fight, and so Ukraine has now been taking their property as a consequence for them, the country, and not fighting. And the public in Ukraine seems to overwhelmingly favor a peace deal with Russia and wants to end this conflict immediately. Now, that's not the voices that we're hearing in Western media. We're hearing the voices that are the strong anti-Russian voices that have been boosted by the United States, et cetera. But from the beginning, the Ukrainian public, I think, would have preferred that this war not happen. And that's why they voted for Zelensky to begin with. That's why the Minsk Accords took place. That's why, that's why they're having such a hard time finding people to fight, and so many people have fled the country. Ukraine doesn't have much left. I mean, Russia has really already won this war, and that's kind of what needs to be understood as the terms of the negotiation. I mean, Russia has already won the conflict. They've secured the Donbass region. The people who voted to join with Russia, who declared independence from Ukraine in 2014, who faced bombardment at the hands of the U.S.-backed government in Kiev for year after year after year, those people, they're now, part of the Russian Federation. Russia moved its forces in. They voted to join the Russian Federation in referendums. And at this point, they're secured as part of the Russian Federation. The question is how many bodies will be thrown into this meat grinder and killed before we finally just kind of acknowledge what is already the case, which is that these regions, these new republics, have joined with Russia. The people there speak the Russian language, consider themselves Russian, broke with Ukraine as far back as 2014. The question is how much longer will the killing go on before we just kind of acknowledge what is the case? And it seems like the terms of ending this conflict and bringing Russia back into sections of the world economy that they were kicked out of at the beginning of the war, that seems to be what's being negotiated right now. And again, the permanent members of the Security Council are to have some role in facilitating the security guarantees of both sides to make sure that this end is really permanent. That seems to be on the table. Ukraine joining the European Union doesn't seem like it's going to happen, but that is something that apparently has been floated by the EU countries, shot down by Viktor Orban. Russia has said that a direct meeting between Zelensky and Putin is on the table. They just have to make sure it's a serious meeting that will end the war, that they'll agree and the war is actually ended. That needs to take place, but Russia is ready to move ahead with this, and they're ready to expand the scope of their talks with the United States and the European to the point of ending the conflict.
And Russia has gained this territory. It now runs Crimea. How does this serve Moscow's long-term goals?
Well, again, this war was about security guarantees. It was about the fact that right on their border, a fanatically anti-Russian government was installed. Prior to 2014, you had a president who was somewhat neutral, between Russia and the West, Viktor Yanukovych, and the United States violently overthrew him with the Euromaidan coup and destabilized Ukraine. And at that point, a fanatically anti-Russian government was put into power. Then the peoples in the Donetsk and Lugansk, other parts of the country declared independence and broke with that government. And then the Ukrainian government began bombing and killing the people in those regions, outlawed the speaking of the Russian language, and was tearing down the World War II memorials, and was just kind of basically making it clear that the people in the what used to be the eastern regions of Ukraine, they were not considered to be real citizens of the country. They were considered to be Russians. They were considered to be unappreciated, unwelcome, and the fact that they declared independence was to be, made them, separatists and considered them to be terrorists by the government. Shelling and bombing took place, and Russia stepped in and said, let's negotiate to bring them back into Ukrainian society. And the Minsk Agreement was signed, and the idea was that gradually Ukraine would bring them back into Ukrainian society, recognize their rights, and it turns out that was not serious. That was not something that they intended to actually carry out. It was just to buy time, and the whole time, while the Minsk Agreement had been signed, the CIA and the British intelligence were in Ukraine setting up military training camps and facilities and, funding Ukrainian nationalist extremists and others to prepare for a conflict with Russia. The whole thing was just set up from the beginning to have a conflict with Russia, and Ukraine continued to indicate that it might join NATO. And then finally, in 2022, Russia said, okay, we've had enough. We're going to have to move in and protect the peoples of the eastern regions, and we're going to have to make sure that Ukraine does not become a threat to us. They talked about denazification. They talked about their security guarantees that Ukraine will not join NATO, et cetera, and they moved in. And that is the basis of the conflict, and that's already won at this point. The people in Donbass, they are, at this point, part of the Russian Federation. They voted to join the Russian Federation. There's Russian military personnel there. I mean, they're secured as part of the Russian Federation now. This is the new republics. And it appears that it's understood pretty universally that Ukraine will not join NATO. That has already been agreed to. So Russia has accomplished everything it wants to accomplish. And that makes it hard for Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is going to have to sell this as if somehow he stood up to Putin. He, put Russia in their place. Russia has achieved its objectives in the war. The negotiations are taking place on the terms of Russian victory. Russia has won the conflict. The question is, what exactly will be the terms of ending this conflict, with Russia having secured what it set out to do. Russia got what it wanted. It wanted Ukraine not to join NATO. It wanted the people of the, Donbass region to have their protection and to stop being bombed and to be, part of the Russian Federation. That's been agreed upon. So Russia won the war. The question is, how does the war end with that understanding?
What does this potential peace deal reveal about Trump's approach to U.S. foreign policy and alliances, particularly compared to the Biden administration's stance on Ukraine and NATO?
Well, first of all, you have to remember that Trump would not be able to do what he's doing now if it had not been revealed by Tulsi Gabbard, a huge amount of documents revealing that the Russiagate scandal, the Russiagate hype, was just a complete hoax. Russia did not interfere in the 2016 elections to help Trump win. They did not expect Trump to win. They did not consider Trump to be the better candidate. And there was no Russian effort to support Trump. That is something that Hillary Clinton's campaign made up for political reasons. But the intelligence agencies under Barack Obama's leadership decided to promote Hillary Clinton campaign talking points, to promote the Steele dossier, which they knew had no real credibility. And they tried to do everything they could to play up this idea that Trump was an agent of Russia, was working for Putin, was beholden to Putin. And that was to make sure that Trump and his first term could not, de-escalate this before it ever happened. If Trump had been able to do what he wanted to do, he could have come into office and negotiated a de-escalation of the Ukraine crisis back in, 2017, 2018, and it never would have come to this. But Trump came into office being investigated for collusion with Russia, being investigated for allegedly having ties to Russia. And so Trump was on the defensive. He sent lethal aid to Ukraine, which was something that Obama had not, done yet. And Trump was on the defensive for his entire first term. Then Biden came in, and Biden escalated things. After the 2020 election, Biden came into office, and he escalated the hostility toward Russia. And 2022, it became clear that Russia had to move its forces in. Trump came into office then again in the recent election, saying that that I want to end this war. And he was asked repeatedly on the campaign trail, don't you want Ukraine to win? And he said, I don't care who wins. I want the killing to stop because the body count is massive. I mean, at least 1 million people have died in this conflict. And he said, I just want it to end. And so Trump won the recent election, the 2024 election, on a platform of ending this conflict. He took office. He said he could end it within 24 hours. That was apparently not realistic. But now it looks like there is a chance that he could end it, pretty far into his presidency, into the first year of his presidency. He could end the conflict. If he did so, that would reflect American public opinion. The U.S. public doesn't want America involved in this conflict. The U.S. public is, they're not like solidly on the Russian side. They're not, hating Ukraine or anything like that. But most Americans just don't want the USA dumping billions and billions of tax dollars into this war and continuing it. They don't want the United States involved. And Trump took office with an electoral mandate to get the USA out of this conflict. And it appears he's trying to deliver on that. And that, there are a lot of people in the Trump camp that are very hostile to China, that are hoping they can pull Russia away from China. I don't think that's realistic, economically speaking. But there is a feeling in the Trump camp that doing business with Russia is not so bad. Russia is not the country we should hate. And Russia, antagonizing them doesn't really serve U.S. interests in the long term. And that you have to also remember that Biden was completely humiliated because they really did expect that the whole world would boycott Russia in response to the special military operation. They thought that when Russia went into Ukraine, at that point they could get Saudi Arabia to cut off Russia, they could get India to cut off Russia, they could get Israel to cut off Russia, and the world didn't do it. And Brazil continued buying Russian fertilizer. And, Saudi Arabia is a major oil exporting country. They need to be able to call the Russian government and negotiate oil price outputs because of the oil prices. And India continues to buy Russian oil. And the whole world, didn't go along with what the Biden administration had hoped, which is that Russia would just be cut off completely and Russia would be made a global pariah and Russia would be forced out of the world market. It didn't happen. So the war was really lost when Biden's bluff was called and the world didn't, cut off Russia. The war was lost at that point, and Russia's economy has continued to speed along forward. Russia hasn't gone bankrupt. Russia hasn't had an economic collapse, and as a result, this war has not had the effect that Biden was hoping for. So at this point, the terms of Russia re-entering the Western, side of the world economy and continuing to be part of the SWIFT system, continuing to be, have, investments and perhaps doing business in Britain and the United States again. That's what's being negotiated here because Russia isn't going to go away. They hoped that this war could be used to just completely isolate Russia and cut them off. Didn't happen.
Just one other question, Caleb. How might this deal reshape Europe's security architecture, especially NATO's eastern flank and the EU's role in mediating conflicts? And, of course, I guess long-term peace in Eastern Europe.
Well, it's interesting because overwhelmingly the public in Europe is not solidly behind antagonizing Russia. At the beginning of this conflict, the Nord Stream pipeline was blown up because Germany was going to buy Russian natural gas. And then, it was blown up to make sure they didn't buy that Russian natural gas. The Alternative for Germany party is rising in popularity. The New Right is popular across Europe. Largely because they take the position that it's not in European countries' interest to go along with the United States and Britain to oppose Russia. However, the establishment that exists within the various EU countries is very desperate to keep antagonism to Russia because that is the whole basis of their political careers. And it raises questions about sovereignty because it seems like with the public in these EU countries saying, what has Russia ever done to us? Maybe we can buy their gas from them. They really don't want to invade us. I really don't think they're going to, march through up into Poland and then eventually take over all of the European Union. That doesn't seem realistic. That seems to be pretty widespread in the EU countries, but yet the ruling parties in France and in Germany and in Belgium and elsewhere, push this idea of hostility to Russia, Russia being a big threat, because that's the basis of their careers. And these are parties and these are individuals who were aligned with the United States and with the fall of the Soviet Union were part of that new U.S.-dominated establishment in Europe. And that if Russia and the hostility toward Russia de-escalates, they'll lose their ability to be in power. And so the EU establishment is in question here. their credibility is in question here. And if peace is established, it may spell the end of some of the various social democrats and Christian Democrats and others who have kind of emerged as part of the post-Cold War political ruling order of the European Union. So their careers are on the line here. And that's why there's desperation on their part and such fear of a peace deal, because this is going to overturn the post-Cold War establishment in the European Union. That's clear.
Caleb Maupin, insightful as always. Thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Sure thing.
That was Caleb Maupin, journalist, political analyst, and founder of Centre for Political Innovation, and the author of Who Are the Houthis and What Are They Fighting For?